Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lawcast. This week, we're going back to cover what is, in my opinion, the greatest WarGames match of them all. It's WrestleWar 1992, and it's the shining moment for the Dangerous Alliance, which, to be fair, is probably a stable you've never heard of, but it's the best stable you've never heard of.
It might be better than any stable you have heard of. It's a collection of talent so unparalleled in the history of wrestling that it's stunning that it didn't really result in like a single extra buy because of the way it was pushed and promoted by the people in charge.
Yeah, that is a tribute to the incompetence of WCW that this stable didn't draw money. So you've got Rick Rude, Bobby Eaton, Steve Austin, Arn Anderson, Larry Zbyszko, Medusa, and they're managed by Paul Heyman.
At one time or another, every single member of that stable has drawn gigantic money, including the manager and the valet, and they couldn't do shit with them.
Now, this is kind of their one big night, and this is it, which is insane to me that they didn't let these guys just run roughshod over the company for a year.
Would have made total sense, except, unfortunately, they had another guy who was going to run roughshod over the company for a year coming in.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that also goes awry. They had two potential mega super duper forever mega heels, and they fuck them both up at the same time.
Yeah. Now, what you probably should have done is you probably should have put Vader in the Dangerous Alliance.
Put him in there, man.
Yeah. Make Vader the leader, and like Rude is the U.S. champion. Eaton, it gets a little unbalanced because you've got Zbyszko and Anderson as like the tag guys, and you've got both Austin and Eaton as like your mechanics. But maybe you kick Eaton out or something. Whatever.
You don't really
can make
need Eaton, yeah.
Kick Zbyszko out. Fuck Larry Zbyszko.
I don't know, but him and Arn as a team is so good.
I like the Enforcers. Yeah,
just these old dick men.
Hard ass old school wrestlers.
Every time I see him, it reminds me of like playing basketball at the Y, and you just see like a bunch of old dudes, and you're like, yeah, I can take these guys, and then they just school you mercilessly.
Like, these guys will stretch you.
Yes. They are some of the biggest con men in the business. They want nothing more than to shoot on you.
So this show happens kind of in the weird interim period between Jim Herd and Bill Watts. Herd, after just running the company into the ground for the previous few years, has finally left at the very beginning of 1992. He lost a power struggle with Dusty Rhodes. I think he gave an ultimatum to Turner management. Either he goes or I go. And they said, okay, Jim, thanks for your work. Get the fuck out of here.
Which was a completely reasonable thing to do. Jim Herd did a lot of good. And we've kind of trod this ground a little bit before. But the biggest thing that he did was make it look like an actual palatable television show that you would want to watch. And the worst thing that he did was fill that television show with the biggest group of like ridiculous asshole gimmicks that you could possibly imagine. And we're going to go through a lot of those tonight. But he had his good parts too. He just backed himself into a corner and wouldn't give up.
So for these couple months, WCW is run by a guy named Kip Fry.
Yes.
He is not a wrestling guy. He's a lawyer at Turner who had done some legal work for WCW, including he was the guy who filed the lawsuit and argued the case when they were trying to get the NWA title back from Ric Flair when he left with it in 1991. So when the job opened up, they're like, okay, we can trust Kip. He's not some asshole. He knows a little bit about wrestling. Let's put him in charge. He doesn't know much of anything about wrestling, but unlike Jim Herd, like, he realizes that, and he just sort of lets the wrestling guys run things, which is a good approach.
Yeah, it's a very good approach. It doesn't wind up like turning their fortunes completely around or anything, but you can tell when that period comes because it's just a lot of very competent things being done. There are good matches being put on. We're still mired in a lot of the same problems, but he doesn't make things worse.
It's just a wrestling promotion is a ship. You don't turn it on a dime. There was years of digging a hole here. It was going to take some time to get out of it.
And it was pretty clear that Kip probably went back to Turner and was like, look, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. We got to get a wrestling guy in here to kind of steer this ship. Let's go find somebody who knows what they're doing. And they went out and found arguably the only person that was out there available who did know something, and it was an even worse disaster.
That's the amazing thing, is Bill Watts must have seemed like such a slam dunk hire at the time, but it's the equivalent of hiring like an old kind of dinosaur football coach who hasn't changed with the times and his offense doesn't work anymore.
It would be like a company like Ring of Honor hiring Jim Cornette. Oh, wait, they did that.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened.
Yeah, no. I mean, we see this throughout wrestling history. People are always looking back instead of forward. They're always looking for who did this the last time instead of who's going to do this the next time, including WWE bringing in Eric Bischoff just last year.
Just to eat catering while they realized he didn't have anything to offer.
Yeah. So Watts is about to start at the beginning of June. They offered Fry some kind of like token number 2 spot to stay on, but he didn't want to do it and moved to a different division at Turner. So he's kind of lame duck at this point. Like, the word has broken that Watts is coming in. I don't know if Watts had any booking influence on this show. Nothing about it like jumped out at me as like, oh, that was a Bill Watts call.
The only thing that jumped out at me was teaming Ron Simmons with Junkyard Dog, which I guarantee you that's what Bill Watts would have wanted to do if he was like, well, Ron Simmons, that's my guy. I'm going to team him with my old guy.
Might have also just been a Jim Ross call. Like, JR's involved in creative at this point.
Jim Ross's creative ideas are so indistinguishable from Bill Watts's that you might as well just be talking to the same person.
Watts' first move was to bring back Ole Anderson to help book, which did not win him a lot of friends in the locker room.
I don't know if there's a more disliked booker in wrestling history, except maybe Jerry Jarrett, who it's amazing no one ever just murdered him in an alley.
Yeah. Like, Ole Anderson, just not a very likable fellow.
I don't see what's so unlikable about him. He seems like such a lovely man.
So what's been going on in front of the camera? Sting won the WCW title from Lex Luger at Super Brawl in Luger's last match, as he is leaving for the World Bodybuilding Federation.
Oh boy!
Oh.
And a young Cewsh is about to spend good, honest money on that.
Fuck. Yeah. So, I mean, bringing an end to Luger's title run, not so great, but he was put in a bad position having to be the first champion after Flair. Nobody was going to succeed in that role. It felt like he kind of took the bullet for the company there.
It's true. And the biggest problem, though, is that all of these shenanigans, what should have been the most obvious and easy transition in the world, from Flair in the 80s to Sting in the 90s, it should have been so natural and easy, and all of this bullshit gets so in the way.
Yeah, I mean, so Sting won the title back in 90, but they completely dropped the ball on his title run because they made him feud with the Black Scorpion because they had no challengers for him.
How do you not plan that out? God.
These are not the brightest guys. And then after 6 months, they just kind of put the belt back on Flair. And then they tried to get Flair to take a pay cut, and he quit.
And then everything went to shit. So now Sting
and that's how we got to where we are right here.
Yeah. Now this is Sting's company now, and he's obviously the most over person in the company. He absolutely should be the champion. He's got Vader on the horizon, which is awesome.
They've already set that up. Vader's already attacked him and busted up his ribs. I mean, Sting is a man with a target on his back. From the moment he won the title, at the post-Super Brawl press conference, Rick Rude interrupted, demanded a title shot, and then attacked Sting. So the backstory on Rude, he came to WCW the previous fall when he was revealed as the Halloween Phantom at Halloween Havoc. We did that show. I believe that has the Chamber of Horrors match on it.
Sure does, buddy. That is a garbage show.
Yeah, with one great moment where they reveal that Rick Rude is the Halloween Phantom, which is an awesome surprise.
It
And
is.
then Paulie dangerously reveals that though he's been fired as a commentator, he still has his manager's license, and he's going to unleash hell upon WCW with his newest signee, Rick Rude. And he is particularly going to unleash hell upon the face of WCW, the man called Sting.
What an amazing
World
plot.
Championship Wrestling.
And see, what you could have had here is that it's so rare to have a top babyface that's so like definitively the top guy. And basically what they've created is like a dozen credible challengers to him. It's amazing.
This can be every pay-per-view this year. Sting versus Zbyszko, Sting versus Anderson, Sting versus Eaton, Sting versus Rude, Sting versus Austin. And then if he beats them all, then it's Vader, and he's so worn down, Vader takes him out, and we find out Paulie's now managing Vader, and he won in the end.
And it seems like such a force that cannot be reckoned with. But then you start building up other guys, you start building up the Steiner brothers, you start building up Pillman, you start bringing. And then you get to another WarGames where it's just like loser leaves WCW or some shit. That's classic. That's how you make money in this wrestling business. Is you do shit like that.
That was a concept foreign to WCW in this era.
Yeah.
So Dangerously proceeds to assemble a formidable stable known as the Dangerous Alliance. Rick Rude, stunning Steve Austin, beautiful Bobby Eaton, the Enforcer Arn Anderson, and Larry Zbyszko. As we've said, just what a crew that is.
Also, I'm going to choose this moment to point out that the Dangerous Alliance versus Sting Squadron is maybe the biggest disparity between two stable names in the history of professional wrestling in terms of quality. Sting Squadron is a shit-ass name. The Dangerous Alliance is maybe the coolest name I've ever heard.
So to add some more intrigue, Nikita Koloff made his return to WCW after he had been gone since the previous summer and saved Sting, which is unusual because he had been feuding with Sting before he left in 1991. So the question is, where do Nikita's loyalties lie?
Doesn't Nikita Koloff feel like he's from like a different decade?
Yeah, he's from the 80s.
Yeah, it just does. It feels so weird to have him be here.
It feels like longer. He does not make sense in this era. Like you look at him and like he doesn't belong here. Like he's past it. Like he was one of those guys. It's like a Goldberg Ultimate Warrior type of thing where how long can that gimmick last?
Yeah. It's funny that you say that this is like probably your favorite WarGames match, because I think that my favorite WarGames match and this one have a lot in common. And my favorite one is the one where they think that Sting's betraying them. So like it's Sting versus the NWO.
Yeah, I love that one too. I think that one's got the best story.
Yes.
This one's got the best action.
But it's about the same story. It's just much more effective when they do it there. But Nikita's in the Lex Luger role here.
Yeah. We just know Nikita's going to turn. We know he's going to join the Dangerous Alliance. It's unclear why he's on Sting's team. Kip Fry, on an episode of WCW Saturday Night, explained that he submitted an application.
He submitted an application?
He turned in his resume and his cover letter and his references.
So in theory, fucking Tracy Smothers could have been the last member of Sting's team if he had gotten all of his paperwork together?
Yeah.
Sure.
So as we said, the main event tonight is a WarGames match as the Dangerous Alliance takes on Sting's Squadron. Sting's team is Sting, Barry Windham, Dustin Rhodes, Ricky Steamboat, and Nikita Koloff. That is quite a team, too.
Yes, it is.
This is 10 Hall of Famers here. 10 for 10.
And that really proves itself in the match, because the problem is, and we'll get into this a little bit later, action-wise, you're right. This is the best one. It's a little light on meaning, because it doesn't really feel at the end like a lot has been accomplished, but fuck, there's just so much talent in the ring.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about all the intrigue behind the camera. In front of the camera, they've rebranded their Saturday night World Championship Wrestling show as WCW Saturday Night, and they changed. I mean, I always think of like WCW Saturday Night as just kind of being a continuous show that went from about the 70s until WCW closed, but there were various iterations of it. It was Georgia Championship Wrestling, and then when they got the time slot back from the WWF, it was called World Championship Wrestling for a while. That eventually became the company name. This is WCW Saturday Night, which is what I always think of. 6:05 on the Superstation. That's when the real wrestling's on.
It always became so depressing to me that WCW Saturday Night became like such a gigantic afterthought that it was like their third or fourth most important show at one point.
It was so iconic at this point. Like,
it's one of the most important wrestling shows that's ever existed.
It's the first, really the first national wrestling. I guess the first national wrestling show was on the Dumont Network in the 50s, but the first after that, like the wrestling boom is the Superstation, which is your cable station that airs coast to coast.
And when you hear people from that time talk about like WCW Saturday Night, like when you hear them talk about it in the 80s, like literally it was like something you set your clocks by. Like it was something
TV.
You sprinted home from work or sprinted home from school, something you took your kids out of school and watched together on the couch. Like it was that. It was important.
I feel like if you ask somebody over a certain age, like in the South, like when's wrestling on, they'd be like 6:05 Saturday night.
Yeah, just automatically.
Yeah.
I think somebody did that in an interview with Cody one time, because to Cody it's like when they were talking to TNT, he initially pitched 6:05 Saturday nights on TNT.
I love it. I actually love that idea. I mean, I've talked about it, that I think that's a great time slot. I'd love a wrestling show on early Saturday evening.
It's just such a good time. You're not doing anything else.
No.
It's before you go out or before you eat dinner. Like it's a perfect time.
It's like after you're done with like whatever you were doing that day, yard work, like going to the beach, whatever, in between, before nighttime. Like just this perfect period where you're just kind of sitting around, chilling, drink a beer, like hang out, watch some wrestling.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's the same as the Thanksgiving idea, really. Like, when is the time of day that people are most likely to just be sitting around doing jack shit? 6:05 on Saturday nights.
Yeah. So the format was like a talk show style with Jim Ross and a rotating guest host in front of a studio audience, and then they would do commentary on pre-taped matches from Center Stage in Atlanta. And the main event each week was a 2 out of 3 falls match, which I don't think lasted very long because that's going to get old.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. I'm not a big look, I'm just not a big fan of anything that takes away the sudden death aspect of wrestling. Like, that's what makes wrestling so dramatic, is it can end at any time. And a 2 out of 3 falls match takes that away until the last fall.
And I know the idea of the 2 out of 3 falls match, it's basically rooted in the very, very beginnings of wrestling. Like that's how like George Hackenschmidt used to do his matches back when it was half a shoot, half a work. Like that's based in like the carnival amateur wrestling scene. So I get that the tradition is the tradition. But yeah, I don't think I've ever seen one that I liked more than I would have liked a regular match.
Yeah. All right. So to get into the show, it's Sunday, May 17th, 1992. We are at the Jacksonville Memorial Coliseum in Jacksonville, Florida. There's about 6,000 in attendance, 5,000 paid for a $72,000 gate, sub $100,000 gate for a pay-per-view.
Not great.
Want to calculate the average ticket price on that? Because it is not high.
How many do you think they just flat out gave away at this point?
About 1,000 of the 6,000.
Woof.
Like $14.50 a ticket.
God, that sucks. Even for the early 90s, that's ridiculously cheap.
That is rough. I mean, yeah. You think of what pay-per-view tickets cost today.
And I mean, we're talking about like the average for all of the seats is that.
Yeah.
So like sitting front row probably cost $30.
Yeah, well, the upper deck was like $5, I guess. Like that's what they I think the WWF charged $10 like at the Silverdome in the 80s to sit in the upper deck at WrestleMania, and that was a dome. This is like a fucking armory.
Sheesh.
Yeah. Buy rate, not good. 0.61 for 105,000 buys. Worst buy rate in WCW history to this point, but subsequent shows are going to be even worse, it turns out.
What do you attribute that to specifically? Like, obviously, the quality is going to be all over the place, and the Watts era is going to make it look like a dumpster. But, like, at least at this point, what do you attribute the low buy rate to?
Here. No world title match. I don't know if was War. I don't know that WarGames was still special by this point.
And I don't think they spent enough time building up the Dangerous Alliance as a real threat to Sting. Do you think that Sting was having trouble drawing himself?
Yeah, I mean, he really didn't draw much. I mean, he was the only thing that could draw it all for them, but, I think they had already blown it with him by this point. Like, I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. It's 4 years ago he had the match with Flair. It took him forever to get the belt, and then they totally screwed it up when he finally did.
Yeah, you're right. That's just such a bummer because you so rarely get a shot at having like that generation defining wrestler that can draw for you. And they had it, and it was so easy, and they just blew it for no reason.
Yeah. On commentary, the team of Jim Ross and Jesse Ventura. It was an added appeal that we finally cover a show with these two together. Like, these are probably my two favorite commentators. I've talked before about how they didn't have chemistry. I actually thought they were okay here.
This was great.
I feel like I remembered them being really bad, and I do think they had some shows where they were not in sync, but I thought they were pretty good on this one.
I think we've only covered one other show that they commentated together on, and in that one you could see that Jim Ross was like visibly annoyed with Jesse the entire time. He does such a better job on this show because basically he just deflects Jesse continually. Yeah. So like Jesse will be like go off on a rant about some nonsense, and he'll just like deflect him off until Jesse like forgets what he was talking about, and then he just goes quiet.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm focused on this great contest we're having in the ring right now.
It felt a lot like when he used to commentate with Heyman, where he would just like, "Come on, that's ridiculous. I gotta call this match." Like, I really like that. I love.
JR can play with it. He was great with Heyman and Cornette before this. Like,
yes.
But yeah, him and Jesse hit and miss because he doesn't like Jesse. Like, he's been open about that. Not really personally, but he was very annoyed that Jesse was getting paid more than him to barely do any work. Like, Jesse is on a much lighter schedule and making way more money, while JR is busting his ass doing commentary on all their shows and working in the office. And Jesse is like coming down to a TV taping once a month and a pay-per-view every once in a while.
But I feel because guys like JR and Bischoff have kind of shaped the narrative over time, there's this perception of Jesse that he like sucked ass at his job while he was in WCW, or that he didn't try.
He's really good here.
He's not mailing it in for 1 second. He's bringing his 80s A game all day here.
This was a vintage performance. This felt straight from his peak.
Let's say he's saying like cryptic things, and he's calling out the wrestlers, and you can tell Jesse's locked in because he's actually responding to the matches. Because when he's checked out, he just doesn't even bother to watch them. Like, he just talks about whatever he wants to talk about. But here he's like really dialed into everything that's going on. Like, it was beautiful to see.
What makes him great is, he has his fun in the preliminary matches and like in a big match, even at the beginning. But when the match gets serious, he gets serious too.
Yeah. Like, you can tell there's a part of Jesse Ventura that is a fan of professional wrestling. And when something actually grabs him, like, he is all in on it. And it's beautiful to watch.
You can always tell what guys he's a particular fan of.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, big time.
Yeah. Like, always a fan of Ricky Steamboat. Always puts Steamboat over. Clearly likes Brian Pillman.
Oh, yeah, big. He was nuts for the Pillman-Zenk match all the way through.
Yeah. In the dark match, Diamond Dallas Page and Thomas Rich defeated Firebreaker Chip and Bob Cook.
Tommy Wildfire Rich is on the dark Like,
Former NWA champion. And him and DDP are about the same age, I think.
isn't that nuts that Tommy Rich's career is completely over and DDP's hasn't even started yet?
When he was like 16 and DDP started when he was like 35.
Fuck. And I genuinely don't know who Bob Cook is. He does not have a Wikipedia page. I'm not going to bother to look him up any further than that.
Quick opening package focuses on the WarGames match. Then we go to Tony Schiavone and Eric Bischoff, who are in kind of a host role where they'll kind of go back to them just to fill time between the matches. What did you think of that?
I absolutely loved it. I thought this was such a great role for Eric Bischoff. And in fact, I would have loved it if he had continued in a role much like this instead of becoming like the primary play-by-play guy. Because like what he's really good at doing is like putting a little pizzazz on what you just saw and like shepherding you on to the next topic. Like that's good. And there's a place for that. And this was good. Like him as a primary announcer is trash because he doesn't know what he's talking about, and you can tell. But here he can just be like, man, what a hell of a match that was. I can't believe they did that. Fantastic.
And we've got another great one coming up as we've got Greg the Hammer Valentine against Bobo Brazil. Who the hell knows? It's such a random collection of talent in WCW at this point.
Every single match feels like people from like wildly
different decades.
It feels like just like some sort of like dream like promotion that you just come up with, and you're just like, yeah, fuck it. Greg Valentine versus Bobo Brazil. Why not? Put Seth Rollins in there. It's a triple threat.
Then we go to ringside to Jim Ross and Jesse Ventura. Ventura says that he's been to war. Actually, he hasn't. He was in the Navy during Vietnam. He wasn't a SEAL. He was underwater demolitions. He never saw combat. Just want to point that out.
I don't think he was referring to Vietnam, Steve. I think he was referring to the movie The Predator.
Fair point.
He's seen war.
Or The Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
He's seen war, Steve.
Opening match is for the United States Tag Team Championship. We've got Greg Valentine and the tailor-made man, Terry Taylor, against the fabulous Freebirds.
His name, not his nickname, his name is the tailor-made man.
Just like Tom Zenk was always the Z-Man in WCW.
I could not stop thinking about this the whole time. Like, Terry Taylor has like a 20-year career where he accomplishes literally nothing across every promotion in the entire world. And I couldn't figure out why he kept just getting chance after chance after chance. And then people would bring him into their booking teams. Like every company in the world has had Terry Taylor on their booking team, despite the fact that he can't book his way out of a fucking paper bag. And the fact that he like is poison in any office and is one of the most political men in the history of wrestling. And I was trying to figure out why. And I kind of came across this idea that, you know how in the NFL, like once you've been on like a first round pick as a quarterback, you just keep getting re-signed, even if you suck. You're
going to get more opportunities.
Just the idea that you're supposed to be good just registers in people's minds and it never shakes. You feel like Terry Taylor should be good. Like he should be able to draw. Like he should be able to talk and he should be able to wrestle. But he can't actually. He's very bad at everything. But you can't get that worm out of your head that tells you that he was what his first impression was. It's astounding.
Love the Freebirds entrance with the pyro here.
We've shat on Michael Hayes
love the fabulous Freebirds.
Yes, the Freebirds are awesome. And
this entrance USA is the greatest entrance theme of all time.
And they come out here and like I'm so used to these early WCW shows literally looking like they were shot in like a sub ECW bingo hall. And so when they come out and there's actual production quality and they do that long shot with like the fireworks and Bad Street USA's going, they look like actual rock stars. It's incredible.
Yeah. And then Valentine and the tailor-made man out second. They're the United States Tag Team Champions. These belts have been around for years, but they're going to be retired a few months after this. It's reaching the point where WCW just doesn't have the tag division depth that they did in the 80s. And also, they're about to introduce the NWA tag titles into the company, so there's really no need for these titles anymore.
The idea that anyone ever had a tag division that could support multiple tag titles is nuts.
Man, but yeah, when you think about WCW, back when they had the Freebirds, the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express, the Road Warriors, the Samoan SWAT team.
And those were the guys on top, and the Steiners. And
got the Steiners, yeah.
And then you had all like the young teams coming underneath, like your fucking Young Pistols and crap like that. Like, yeah.
Think about the WWF in the 80s when they had the Hart Foundation, the Bulldogs, Rougeos, the Dream Team, Valentine and Beefcake.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, this was the golden age of tag team wrestling.
It was actually a thing people valued.
Yeah. I mean, I've always thought that the end of the territories killed tag wrestling because inevitably tag teams just run out of stuff to do. They get stale. I mean, New Day has been remarkable how long they've been able to stay together. But in this era, rarely can a tag team not after about 2 years, bookers break them up. The key in the territory days was when you ran your run out, you could just go to another territory.
Exactly. And like tag teams could have like big enough names. The funny thing too is that Vince McMahon like guides so much of this, and he's made it clear that his philosophy is why pay two guys when I can pay one.
Hates tag team wrestling.
Hates it. Doesn't get it. Doesn't like it. Thinks it's flatly unnecessary.
The Freebirds work on Valentine's arm for the early part of the match. They tag behind the referee's back, and the referee lets it go. I hate when they do that. It makes no sense to me that that's allowed. Like, just make it consistent. Referee didn't see the tag's not allowed.
Yeah, they use it on baby faces all the time, which of course that's a heat-worthy way to get that going. But just occasionally use it on a heel so that you show that it's the same across the board. It makes sense. It doesn't make sense that if you were a ref, you would ever let a tag that you didn't see go. Like, wait, no, why?
Taylor tags in. He gets worked over. Taylor gets thrown to the floor. Taylor throws Garvin out to the floor, and Valentine gets in some shots behind the referee's back. There's a heat segment on Garvin. He manages to hot tag out to Hayes. Hayes sets up for the DDT. Taylor catches him with a forearm behind the referee's back. Looks like that's going to be the finish, but Hayes gets out at 2. Hayes gets worked over. Valentine gets him in the figure 4. Garvin breaks that up. Hayes catches Taylor with a big left hook, tags in Garvin. Jimmy Jam cleans house. He gets tripped by Valentine. Taylor gets a knee drop, but Hayes breaks up the pin. I've also got a complaint about referees just letting guys break up pins over and over. Like, there's got to be some limit to this. The old NWA rule was you got one save. And it was sort of like the match really begins once both teams are out of saves. And I love the strategy of that it's like, when do we use the save?
Yeah. And that you can come in on another occasion and get your 5 seconds to do a double team move or something, but that's it. That's the one you get. So you get your save, you get your double team move, and if you don't accomplish it through that, well then figure it out.
Garvin sets up for the DDT. Valentine rushes in to make the save. Garvin drops his shoulders and manages to backdrop Valentine while he keeps Taylor in a front face lock and then nails him with the DDT to get the pin in 16 minutes. Big pop for the Freebirds win. Pretty good opening tag match.
We should probably mention also that the fans, basically from the moment the Freebirds emerge out from behind the curtain, are chanting DDT continuously for 16 minutes.
DDT is so fucking over, and both Hayes and Garvin use it as their finish.
It seems like the most basic finisher of all time, but like just understand that like it's crazy over.
Yeah, I mean it's the most protected finish in wrestling at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Jake's made it such a
Yeah.
gigantic thing.
The Undertaker kicked out of the DDT, and I think he's the only guy who had done it at this point.
That's the only reason that Jabroni still has a job.
Next match, we've got Johnny B. Bad against Tracy Smothers. Smothers, one of that groups of wrestlers that's just kind of a walking Confederate flag, like, Bill Irwin. Who else is in that category?
Oh gosh, Michael P.S. Hayes.
Yeah. He was formerly one half of the Young Pistols with Steve Armstrong. They've split, and he's embarking on what will be an unsuccessful singles run.
I can't think of many people in wrestling history who have ever been more miscast than Tracy Smothers as one of the Young Pistols. Because he already looks like a surly old man in a cowboy hat here. And he'll still be wrestling with that basic gimmick 40 years later. Like, he's still doing it today. Like, nothing's ever going to stop Tracy Smothers from having a bad match on an indie show while wearing a Confederate flag.
Smothers is in control for a while. He runs through some pretty basic offense. Bad comes back with a high knee. Jesse complains about how much he cheats, that he's using closed fists, kicking with the point of the boot, pulling hair, and he's got a point.
I mean, Johnny Bad's finisher at this point is an illegal left hit.
It's illegal. He can't use a closed fist in a wrestling match.
And he's hiding it from the ref. That's like the whole idea, is that the crowd's in on it. That, like, he's sneaking it in there to get the pin.
Bad hits a pretty impressive diving sunset flip from the top rope, and then he hits the left hook, the kiss that don't miss, to get the pin in 7 minutes.
I gotta tell you, my favorite thing about this match is that right at the beginning, Jesse Ventura has the response to Johnny B. Bad that you would absolutely expect Jesse Ventura to have, which is instant flaming homophobia.
Oh, yeah.
And he immediately launches into it. And then over the course of, because sometimes Jesse will just go on talking for long enough that his opinion changes. And, like, this is one of those times where, like, he just keeps talking, and he's like, oh, well, when I was in the military, I never wore makeup. I mean, I did wear earrings, and I did wear dresses sometimes, and, never mind. And he literally just drops it. I'm like, did he just talk himself out of being homophobic?
Yeah. I think JR at some point is like, well, you were pretty flamboyant back in your day there, Ventura.
Ventura's like, oh, yeah, I guess I was.
You have a point there, Jim Ross. Missy Hyatt interviews the Freebirds about their win. They announced they'll be entering the NWA Tag Team Championship tournament and going after the WCW World Tag Team Championship. Too many tag belts.
I'm glad that you were able to suss out what they were talking about, because this is one of the most incoherent interviews I've ever listened to in my life.
They're somehow still gassed like 20 minutes after their match ended.
And, like, Jimmy Garvin, like, cuts at least an intelligible interview. Michael Hayes, purported as one of the greatest talkers of all time, does some, like, Ultimate Warrior level rambling nonsense.
Next match, we've got Marcus Alexander Bagwell against Scotty Flamingo. It's Baby Buff Bagwell versus Baby Raven.
How nuts is that?
I pop so hard for Raven and Scotty Flamingo whenever I see one of these matches. It is so funny to see him with a heartthrob gimmick.
I'm not going to lie to you, okay? I think I actually prefer him as Scotty Flamingo. The Raven character is amazing, and I'm not saying anything of the sort against that. But the idea of this just, like, Miami douchebag.
He looks like John Morrison.
He does. Like, he's actually
a pretty boy.
He's extremely handsome.
Got a great body, too.
And just, like, his gear is fun and different. The gimmick is unlike anything else that you even see in wrestling during this point. Like, it's a genuinely unique gimmick. And I mean, obviously, Raven is what Raven is. It's a great gimmick, and he's great in performing at it. But I don't know, man. There's just something about Scotty Flamingo that tickles me.
Flamingo's in control early until Bagwell sends both guys over the top with a crossbody. Jesse rightfully calls out a mistake by Flamingo when he throws Bagwell back into the ring when he could have won by countout. Always liked how Jesse would point out mistakes that the wrestlers made.
Yeah, it was a little rich of him because I'm sure that he really loved getting those digs into wrestlers since I never made a mistake like that when I was in the ring, Jim Ross.
Bagwell makes a comeback. He hits a fisherman suplex, but Flamingo gets a foot on the ropes. Flamingo blocks a German suplex with an Oklahoma roll and grabs the tights to get the pin in 7 minutes. Not a lot going on there. Two pretty green guys here.
I really, if I had been WCW at the time, though, I would have been really happy with these two because it seemed like they had a ton of future ahead of them. Yeah. I would have thought Marcus Alexander Bagwell had, possible, future Sting potential if I were looking at him here. Between him and
great.
Yeah, between him and John May Be Bad, I was like, I got the heartthrob baby faces for the next 10 years. Little did they know.
We get a promo for the upcoming WCW Beach Blast.
Bodacious babes with booties.
Christ. What? Jesse all night was talking about something. What did he say? Something with big measurements or something like that?
Yes, he keeps hinting at something that he's going to talk about. Like he has a secret about Beach Blast that he's going to reveal, and it has to do with chest measurements, Jim Ross. I can't talk about it.
Don't know what that's referring to.
I have no idea what that's referring to.
Next up, we've got Ron Simmons versus Mr. Hughes. This is supposed to be Simmons and Junkyard Dog versus Cactus Jack and Curtis Hughes, but Cactus and JYD end up brawling before the match. Cactus slams JYD down on the concrete and then hits him with an elbow drop off the ramp. Brutal stuff.
His signature elbow that of all the moves I've ever seen in the history of professional wrestling, this one seems like the most designed to hurt yourself.
Oh my God, imagine. You jump in. It's not a huge drop, but it's a solid 4 or 5 feet down onto concrete, flat back.
Just if you're at home, roll off your couch under the ground and then multiply that by 50.
Ugh. Yeah. And he did this every night.
Every night. This was his signature spot. It wasn't his finish because he never won matches, but it was his signature spot.
No. And then Watts comes in and he gets rid of the pads around the ring and he's doing it on concrete off the ring apron.
There's that thing in Foley's first book where he says that Ric Flair comes up to him and is like, you got to stop doing this shit. You're killing yourself. And
it's right.
It's meant to be fucking out of touch old man, doesn't know anything. No, he's 100% right. This is ridiculous.
There's a reason Mick Foley had to retire at 34 and Ric Flair wrestled until he was 60.
Yeah. It's crazy.
JYD is taken to the back. Simmons hits Cactus with a backdrop on the ramp. Simmons comes in to fight both Hughes and Cactus. We end up getting a singles match between Hughes and Simmons with Cactus on the floor as the corner man for Hughes. JR points out that both Simmons and Hughes played defensive line in college football. Jesse asks where Cactus played. JR says the New Mexico Psychiatric Ward.
And I when I heard that, I remember thinking, good for you, Jim Ross. Because he wasn't really known for being, light on his feet with banter like that, but that was a killer line.
And then Jesse says he looks like he played at Oklahoma, maybe with Bill Watts.
Just 2 barbs directed right at the heart of Jim Ross.
Love that. Hughes is in control. He misses a straddle, and Simmons makes a comeback. Big backdrop, spine buster. Cactus tries to interfere. Simmons takes him out with a cut block. He does the same to Hughes, and he gets the pin. It's kind of crazy that he finishes guys with a cut block rather than that spine buster.
Yeah, that is extremely crazy. This is a terrible finisher.
Oh, looks like it would hurt your knee, but I can't imagine why you would get pinned from that.
And my favorite thing is poor Cactus, who's trying to be a part of this match and do what he's supposed to do. And then every time that he gets up on the apron to do some heel stuff, Simmons just sprints over and decks him right in the face.
Yeah.
He
Fuck
tries to
you,
get in the ring at the
Cactus.
end of the match to be like, "Oh, I'm gonna attack you," and like Simmons like, attacks him before he's even in the ring, and Cactus just like slumps down to the ground like, meh.
Does it make any sense to you that Ron Simmons is the world champion 2 months after this?
No, it certainly seems like he's on the road.
Yeah.
Like they're building him up. Like he seems like U.S. title level already.
Get
Absolutely.
get that U.S. belt on him. Build him for the main event. Maybe he can get the belt next year.
He seems like he should like eventually be part of like Sting's big team against the Dangerous Alliance. Like that seems like a good role for him at this point.
Yeah.
It's just, man, is the idea that he's going to become champ and beat Vader is outrageous.
Bill Watts was just always looking to recreate the Junkyard Dog. Like
I was going to say, like,
big black baby face was the new JYD to him.
How much of an erection do you feel like he got just seeing JYD and Ron Simmons standing next to each other?
In fact, and like Ron Simmons has such a better body than JYD, is such a better athlete than JYD. Like,
It's true.
it's great, all-American football player, ton of charisma, but just not there yet. He's just, he's not ready. There's no reason he should be. He's brand new.
You don't have to rush it at all. Take the stupid headband off of him. Give him a real finisher. Get him a manager or something because he can't talk. Don't just rush him to the belt. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, he's one of those guys for whom the belt just became an anchor. Like as soon as he got it, I think everybody was just like, "No, we don't buy that."
The Jack Swagger rule. That's a brutal one.
Next up, we've got Todd Champion versus the Super Invader. Champion is announced as being from WCW Special Forces.
Yeah, okay. Let me paint you a word picture about Todd Champion, okay? Todd Champion is like 6'4", blonde, 240 pounds of muscle. He looks the part of a superstar.
He's basically Jack Swagger.
But he's got such a confused bunch of shit going on. His tights have the Olympic logo on them. He's announced as being from WCW Special Forces. His jacket has like fringes. It's got like the Sergeant Pepper like shoulder pads with the tassels on them, and on the back is like half an American flag and half an eagle. Is the idea that he's supposed to be like an actual Olympian? Because it's impossible to parse what any of this is supposed to be.
I do not believe he is an Olympian.
I can't imagine. Let's take a trip down Google Lane.
Certainly not on his Wikipedia page.
No, God no. Yeah, I don't understand what any of his thing is supposed to be. It's just a clusterfuck mess. It's like Jim Herd just sat back there and just kept throwing gimmicks at him, hoping something would stick, and it just added up and added up and added up.
And Super Invader is Hercules under a mask.
Yeah, how weird is that? Why did they choose to put him under a mask like that?
I have no idea. He's a famous face.
Also, why is Harley Race managing Vader and the Super Invader?
Doesn't seem like a good... Yeah, it doesn't seem right, does it?
I don't understand.
You would think this would be a squash, but it ends up going over 5 minutes. Invader wins it with a power bomb. He'll be gone by the end of the year. Hercules did not have a lot of gas left in the tank at this point.
And you can tell in this match, like he's not himself, whatever it is that he was when he first started, when he was in WWE, it's not left anymore. What surprised me was how fucking short he was next to Todd Champion. Like, I don't know if WWE just shot it in a certain way that he looked bigger, or if there just weren't that many 6'4" dudes in WWE, but he looked like a tiny ant compared to Todd Champion here.
He's probably off the steroids because I think WCW... I think that was a Kip Fry thing, that he paid guys more if they passed their steroid tests.
Isn't that the best possible way you could do steroids testing? It's not punish the shit out of people, just we'll pay you more if you pass.
Yeah.
I feel like that's how you get guys off of steroids.
Next up, we've got Big Josh versus Richard Morton. Richard Morton is, of course, Ricky Morton as a heel. Yes, they turned Ricky Morton heel. This company is a disaster.
And he's facing Big Josh, who is Matt Bourne,
Yeah,
otherwise known as Doink the Clown, the original,
with
the good one.
a lumberjack gimmick.
This,
Okay, you
the
want to know
idea.
who Richard Morton is a substitute for?
Oh yes.
The Diamond Stud, aka Scott Hall,
Oh my
who
God.
has just left the company because they tried to make him take a pay cut. So he's going to go to the WWF and become a huge star.
How much money does WWF make in the 90s out of WCW's pay cuts?
A lot. I mean, look when you look at it, almost the basis of their boom period is WCW cast-offs.
Yeah, the Great and Powerful Oz and the Diamond Stud
And
become their
then
two biggest stars.
Austin, Foley, Undertaker,
Triple H.
yeah, are all WCW guys that they let go.
God, when you think, yeah, oh my God, you're so right. It's outrageous. They just hand WWE this cadre of talent.
Okay, so Matt Bourne has a lumberjack gimmick. Nothing of any interest happens here.
He
Um,
is wearing jorts and a tucked in flannel shirt.
this is maybe the worst look I've ever seen.
Yep.
And then to top it all off, they completely botch the finish.
Yeah, that's
Josh
bad.
hits a sit down splash. The referee doesn't count the three, but then he just calls for the bell because Morton didn't kick out. I assume he actually got the wind knocked out of him on the splash and couldn't kick out.
Probably. Though I can't believe that Ricky Morton was going to win this match. Like, he was
No.
basically a jobber already at this
Oh,
point.
no, I'm sure. I mean, or maybe like the referee just screwed up and didn't realize that was the finish. But the rule is if their shoulders are down, you count it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the rule.
It's the only way for it to work. Horrible, horrible match.
Oh, it's brutal. Most of the matches on this show have not been good. We've been vaguely complimentary throughout the course of the night because there's a lot of interesting things on this show.
Rated very heavily on a curve so far.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. Like, the actual in-ring quality has been some hot garbage.
Yeah, I mean, we're halfway through the show. We're through 6 matches. There's 3 matches left. Thankfully, these last 3 matches all rule.
They rule ass, and I can't wait to get to this next one because it seems like it shouldn't be awesome, but it so is.
Yeah, it's a light heavyweight championship match as Brian Pillman defends against the Z-Man, Tom Zenk. It's a face versus face match, but there's a lot of tension between them. Pillman keeps saving Zenk from getting beat down by heels. Zenk thinks Pillman is showboating and won't let him handle his own business. Pillman thinks Zenk is ungrateful, so feels like things are about to explode here.
And this feels like the beginning of something. Like, within Brian Pillman, WCW knows that they have one of the premier light heavyweights in the world. WWF, when they get him, will just decide to push him as a heavyweight, and that's fine too. But like, as has the ability to like anchor a potential light heavyweight division that could really take off. That doesn't really happen until like long after Brian Pillman's already gone,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. He just doesn't have the people to wrestle.
I don't
But
think Watts wasn't a Pillman fan for whatever reason. Like,
well, because Pillman talked back to him.
yeah, I guess that was the problem. Like, you'd
But
think
Watts
he'd love
also,
him. Former football player. Watts loves football.
but Watts also wasn't a light heavyweight wrestling guy. He
No.
definitely is not. Like, he
No.
actively hates high flying wrestling.
At the next pay-per-view, Pillman is going to drop the belt to our favorite wrestler, Scotty Flamingo.
Yeah. But just this is such a good example of what could have been, because Tom Zenk isn't the world's greatest wrestler, but in him, Brian Pillman has something that he can carry to a great match, and that's exactly what happens here.
Did you notice Z-Man is afraid of his own pyro during his entrance?
Yes, and I fucking love. I feel like that's a shoot. It has to be, right?
JR and Ventura spend a long time arguing about Pillman's football career. As JR brings up, Pillman was a second-team All-American nose tackle at Miami, Ohio. Ventura says Miami, Ohio is a second-rate school. There's no way Pillman could be a nose tackle. He's not big enough. JR says he was 245 pounds back then, and he's slimmed down a lot to get into wrestling shape.
It does seem nuts that Brian Pillman ever could have been 245 pounds, because he's 180 here soaking wet, right?
Yeah, and that he was a nose tackle, and this isn't that long. I mean, we're talking like 30 years ago.
Now, let the record show that Miami of Ohio is not known as a football program per se.
No, but he's one of the best players in school history.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, he's just one of those, like, I've read like scouting reports on him and stuff, and like they compare him to like John Randall, just like one of those guys that like his motor never stops running.
Yeah. Played in the NFL for a little while. Wasn't big enough to really play on defense, but was a really good special teams player for the Bengals.
Fucking gunner.
Yeah.
Don't want to see him coming.
Mat contest early. Zenk keeps getting the better of it. Ventura really wants to see somebody cheat. That's his question, is like, who's going to break bad first here?
He's absolutely certain. Like, every time somebody like locks in a headlock, it's like,
here's where he's
going to punch him in the throat.
Pillman starts working on Zenk's legs, but then he misses a drop kick. Pillman retakes control. He gets Zenk in the final figure four. Zenk rolls it over. Pillman rolls it back over. Zenk manages to grab the ropes. Pillman hits a cross body, but Zenk rolls through it for a 2 count. Pillman gets a near fall on a crucifix. Pillman goes for a superplex. Zenk fights him off, hits a flying crossbody from the top rope. Somehow Pillman still kicks out. This is a hell of a match for 1992.
There's just so much going on. And it's not like really high flying necessarily, but it just moves at such a faster pace than every other match on this show. It's ridiculous.
Zenk gets Pillman with a big flapjack as a counter to a drop kick. He should have the pin, but he showboats before he covers and only gets 2. Pillman goes to the top rope. He comes off, but Zenk catches him square in the jaw with a drop kick. Zenk covers immediately this time, but Pillman gets a foot on the ropes to break up the pin. Zenk comes off the top rope for a missile drop kick. Pillman dodges it and rolls into a jackknife pin to get the win after 15 minutes. Awesome match.
Just an awesome match.
These guys crushed it.
I want to give a quick shout out to Tom Zenk. Like, that boot that he puts up, like when he's like Brian Pillman's coming off the rope, is one of the coolest images ever. Because for some reason the camera like swings down and is almost shooting up at it. Like, it's a different camera angle than is used to shoot the rest of the match. It's very temporary. I almost feel like the camera guy like dropped his camera. And so we look up and he lifts his foot like up above his own head to boot him. And I was like, I had no idea Tom Zenk could do that.
Next match, we've got the Steiner brothers against Tatsumi Fujinami and Takayuki Iizuka. The winners will be the #1 contenders for the IWGP Tag Team Championship. A lot of tag belts floating around on this show.
Yes, though in fairness, this is just because New Japan wants the Steiner brothers. This isn't really a WCW thing. This is just part of the agreement.
Jesse says this is a natural rivalry since the Steiners are from Michigan and the Japanese auto companies are putting American workers out of their jobs. I'm sure the Turner office was not happy about that comment.
Boy, on one hand, you have to remember that this is right in the middle of like that creeping fear that everyone had in America.
The horrible bust of Flint, the factories closing.
Yeah. Hey, remember how we feel about China now? That's how America felt about Japan in the early 90s.
Yeah.
So that doesn't excuse his rampant racism. It just explains it.
He does compliment Iizuka's body. He says the Japanese wrestlers are normally pretty petite, but Iizuka is absolutely jacked. He's right.
Dude, I gotta say this. Like, a lot of people probably don't know anything about Takayuki Iizuka. His gimmick, he will never get over like this. Like, he will constantly fail in like various pushes. He just won't be very successful. Later in his career, he will basically become an escaped mental patient with a giant metal hand he wears on his hand to assault people with. And it is as far away from this like blue chip young talent as I can possibly imagine, and it's just so delightful to see him like this. He looks like a potential superstar here.
Oh, he looks great.
He's doing like high flying
Yeah.
shit. Like I had no idea he ever could do that.
Yeah, he hits a front flip senton off the top rope.
Which neither Jesse Ventura or Jim Ross have ever seen before because they have no idea what to call it.
They freak out. Scott then hits him with a stiff Tiger Bomb.
Okay, so we got to talk about this because this match, the reputation that it has is that for some reason the Steiner brothers just start shooting on Iizuka. We don't know what exactly Iizuka did in order to piss off Scott Steiner specifically.
He did something.
But this is the moment in this match where the match completely turns. And any moment that Iizuka is in the ring with Scott Steiner, he is in mortal danger. Just some of the stiffest shit I've ever seen anyone take.
Yeah, this next move where Scott gets Iizuka up in like a gut wrench, and then Rick comes off the top with an elbow drop, and it turns out Rick hit the elbow for real and just smashed Iizuka's face.
Yeah, Iizuka is supposed to get out of the ring after that, and he forgets to leave the ring. He's obviously concussed just sitting on the ground.
Yeah, he's got a broken nose. He's got black eyes. He got his face crushed by Rick's elbow here.
And the fascinating thing is, like, dojo boys are trained that, like, hey, if you disrespect a veteran, they will stiff the shit out of you. So he probably knew that this was coming to some extent. And to everyone's credit in this, aside from maybe Scott's, every time Fujinami gets in the ring, Scott and Rick are totally respectful with him. They're just like, hey, let's just work a normal match, no big deal. And like Fujinami jumps into the ring multiple times to save Iizuka from getting his ass kicked.
Yeah, like in kayfabe he's protecting his partner, but yeah, in reality he's protecting his partner from getting killed.
And like Scott isn't really part of this. Like Rick's stiff to begin with. But Rick, when he gets in the ring, he's not really trying to kill anybody.
No.
It's just every time Scott and Iizuka are both in the ring, Scott makes a beeline towards him. It just violently alters his face.
So Izuki and Fujinami set Rick up for like an electric chair drop, like doomsday device type of thing. Izuki comes off with a crossbody. Rick, who is up on Fujinami's shoulders, catches Izuki coming off the top rope and power slams him. That is amazing.
Steve, this brings us full circle back to our very first ever podcast, because the only other time I've ever seen this move was at WrestleMania 9.
Fuck, yeah, it was way more impressive when he did it to one of the Samoans.
But it's such a cool spot. The idea that Rick's going to catch you and then do a fucking backflip while carrying you so that you're going to land right. And both times he did it, nailed it perfectly.
Fujinami tags in. He hits Rick with some real stiff kicks in the legs. Scott tags in, hits a big pump handle slam. Fujinami tags in. We get a Pier 6 brawl. Scott sets up for a superplex, but Fujinami blocks it. A big German suplex from Iizuka, and then a double team spike pile driver.
And that's the funny thing, too, is that there are so many matches throughout history where people start shooting on each other. This is the only one I can remember that, like, complicated tag team moves are being done as people are being petty and shooting on each other.
Well, it's like, okay, we'll do the spots and then we'll fight for real.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Scott's still doing his job. It's just that whenever he gets the chance, he's putting the boot in.
Iizuka hits a missile drop kick. Fujinami locks in a dragon sleeper. Rick tags in, hits an incredibly stiff Steiner line, and then a big belly-to-belly suplex, and then an avalanche belly-to-belly suplex off the top rope from Rick for the pin. Brutal match in a good way.
I don't think anybody other than the Steiners, maybe like Stan Hansen in Japan, has ever had matches that were like this, where it's just like, they're going to just be unreal stiff to the point that you almost don't want to watch it, but it's also just a really good match at the same time. And that doesn't seem like it should work, but it's just, that's what they do. This is like a distinct Steiners match.
All right, it's main event time. It's the match the world has come to see. It's the War Games as the Dangerous Alliance takes on Sting's Squadron. To recap, we've got the Dangerous Alliance team of Arn Anderson, Steve Austin, Bobby Eaton, Rick Rude, and Larry Zbyszko. Sting's Squadron is Sting, Nikita Koloff, Barry Windham, Ricky Steamboat, and Dustin Rhodes. What are the rules of War Games? Can we explain them?
They're kind of dumb. Let's be totally honest.
Two men start in the ring for a 5-minute period, and then there's a coin toss, and the winner of the coin toss, that team gets a guy into the match, and then there's a 2-minute period, and then a guy from the team that lost the coin toss comes into the ring, and then for every 2 minutes thereafter, they alternate entrances until all 10 men are in the match, and then you can actually win the match, which you cannot until everybody's in, and you can only win by submission.
In the match beyond.
There's a lot of rules.
This formula has been tweaked over the years. Like, there have been a lot of times where it was just one coin toss to determine it for the entire match, and times where, like, you won a match in order to determine that your team has, like, the advantage the whole time. And blessedly, later on, they would remove that it has to be a submission stipulation, because that's just an albatross for these matches.
In NXT, do they do it where everybody, like the whole team, it's multiple teams and they all enter at the same time?
They don't all enter at the same time, no. Like, actually, the last one in NXT, they were all in cages up the ramp.
Shark cage.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the whole team entered at once.
No, they went individually.
Oh,
they did one by one
at a time? Okay.
Yeah. So as far as I'm aware, that's still the way that they do it. It would be weird for everyone to all enter at once. That would just suck.
Too big an advantage, yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah. I mean, so my thoughts on how I think these matches should work. I do like the alternating entrances because you always get a big pop for the babyface entrance, and
right.
You get the crowd's going crazy when they come in hot, and the heels really get to work heat when they have the man advantage. So I do like that. I don't think it should be submissions only. I think
it's ridiculous.
It's just kind of a flat way for these matches to end. So I think pinfalls should count. I think it should be elimination style, and I don't think there should be a match beyond. I think, like, if you get pinned at any point in the match, you're eliminated. And then it's really a question of, like, can you survive when you have the disadvantage? Can you last through the 2 minutes without losing a man?
Yeah, that's the one advantage that, like, the Elimination Chamber has over War Games, is that you don't have to wait for the entire match for anything to count. Like, that sucks. Like, I hate the idea that literally you're just going to spend 20 minutes watching people punch each other because it doesn't count until everyone's in. In that case, just put everyone in. Like, why am I... It's the same concept as 2 out of 3 falls matches. Like, why am I watching the first 2 falls when the third one's the only one that matters? Like, you're just wasting my time.
Austin and Windham start the match. Windham with some big fists. He puts Austin into the cage and hits a DDT. Jesse complains about him having a taped fist. It's a no disqualification match. What does it matter?
And tape, really? That's the weapon? Can I also say, how much does Barry Windham look like a skinny Hulk Hogan here?
He really does.
He's wearing the yellow tights. Yeah. He's got, like, that fine blonde baby fine hair. It's ridiculous how much he looks like Hogan.
There's a loud Paulie sucks chant. Crowd is all over Heyman.
Yeah, he does.
Austin hits a diving clothesline from one ring to another. We managed to go the entire night without mentioning there's 2 rings, but that's because they somehow didn't use the other ring for the entire show.
When the show started, I was like, I wonder how they're going to use the second ring, and the answer is they literally don't. They do not.
I guess I get the impulse to try to keep the War Games match special, but it feels like such a missed opportunity.
Yeah, like in every NXT War Games show, they do like 20 spots where like somebody jumps from one ring to the other, and like it's just fun to have that opportunity to add something special to all the matches, not just one.
Austin grabs the roof of the cage and tries to swing himself into Wyndham, but he gets caught and dropped to the mat. The 5 minutes are up. The Dangerous Alliance wins the coin toss. Shock. The heels won the coin toss. Hard to believe.
Never happened before, ever.
This is why it really is better to do a match to determine who gets the advantage, because then the heels can cheat and win.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of like every single time the heels win the coin toss.
And also, the heels have to have the advantage. WarGames can't function with the baby faces having it.
Yeah, the match really does not work if the faces have the advantage. I don't think it's ever happened.
I've seen it before. It was, and you'll never guess, TNA.
Oh, that's right. We did one of those.
Yeah, we did. And the babyface had the advantage, and the whole time you were sitting there like, well, what? All right.
They didn't know how to book a fucking WarGames match?
Go figure.
So Dangerous Alliance wins the coin toss. Rick Rude enters the match for his team. How fucking good does Rick Rude look?
Rick Rude is on fire. Like, his physique is the best it ever was.
He's got the short hair.
And he gets in there and just moving like a snake. Like, he is on fire in this match.
WCW run gets forgotten about, but it's some of my favorite work he ever did.
Well, okay, but let's also remember that, 5 or 6 shows ago, we did bury him as potentially being one of the worst workers of all time.
He had some real stinkers, that is true.
He had at least 3 of the worst matches I've ever seen. But he also was super awesome sometimes.
Austin is bleeding everywhere.
Can we just go ahead? Can we just award an MVP award for this match to Steve Austin? Because WarGames needs one guy who's just willing to go way, way, way past where everyone else is ready to go. And Steve Austin is like trying to make his name in this match.
He cut real deep.
Yeah. But he's also like the only person like moving around like fast for like the first 10 minutes of this match.
Steamboat is in next. He comes in on fire. So I think they were teasing a heel turn with him. He got his face smashed by Rude and the Dangerous Alliance, and he was being like really angry and dark, and he was like, my son is afraid of me. He can't even look at me. Felt like he wanted to turn heel here, and it doesn't end up happening because Ricky Steamboat can't be a heel.
I mean, would you have tried it, though, just to see?
I might have, because he, at this point, he's not doing a whole lot.
Yeah, it could have potentially prolonged his career. Because Ricky Steamboat, for a variety of reasons, winds up retiring way earlier than he really realistically should have. But one of the reasons, too, is just that there wasn't that much of a fucking demand for Ricky Steamboat at a certain point.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see him as a heel. I mean, his wrestling style is so babyface.
Yeah, you're right. He would have had. It's the same as when Ricky Morton turns heel, and we were burying that at the beginning of this show, because it just doesn't work. Like, everything that he does in the ring is like engendered to get your sympathy, whereas everything Ricky Steamboat does is beautiful, and you can't help but admire it.
Truly, maybe the only wrestler I can think of who literally played a babyface for his entire career.
Gosh. Did Sting ever officially turn heel?
I think him and Warrior were a heel tag team in the territory days.
Yeah, I think you're right. So that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, we're literally talking. I don't think Ricky Steamboat ever wrestled one match as a heel.
It's possible. Fuck. That's incredible.
Steamboat DDTs both Rude and Austin. Lots of DDTs in this match.
Which is kind of burying the Freebirds, because like the whole idea is that the Freebirds finish with the DDTs, and that's what the fans are looking forward to. There are like 20 DDTs in this match.
Arn Anderson is next in for the Dangerous Alliance. He hits Wyndham with a DDT, and then a huge double-A spine buster on Steamboat.
No one else should be allowed. There's only 2 people in the history of wrestling who should be allowed to do spine busters. They are Arn Anderson and Batista.
Yeah.
And Batista's just because he could do that like instantly stand-up thing afterwards that made it different. but nobody else.
And they're two different spine busters because Arn does the one where he rotates, and Batista just does the front one where he picks him up and slams him.
Yeah, he just spikes you like that.
But yeah, nobody's ever done the spine buster better than Double A. Like the way he would get guys up and rotate them was unbelievable.
And every single time Triple H has ever done it, it's bummed me out.
Rude and Anderson lock Steamboat in a double Boston Crab, and then they throw him over the ropes into the other ring. Dustin Rhodes is in next. He gets Austin on his shoulders and drops him to the mat, and then he traps Arn's head between the rings. This actually happens in the background as the camera is focusing on Dustin beating up Austin.
It really seems like we should have gotten a better angle on that because it looks painful as shit.
Like, those rings are pretty close together unless I'm missing something.
Yeah.
Zbyszko's in next. Wyndham is ready for him. Zbyszko is the one who broke Wyndham's hand months ago. I think that was back at Halloween Havoc where him and Arn slammed Wyndham's hand in a car door.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It's sometimes hard to place these shows in the timeline because we literally did that Halloween Havoc like 3 years ago.
Yeah, we jump back and forth a lot, but also because a show 2 months after this might feel like it's a completely different wrestling era.
Gotta love the number of like random territory angles AEW redoes.
That's the beautiful thing is that I don't.
But
think
it's fresh though because we haven't seen any of it in so long.
I don't think some people realize just how much of like a love letter to WCW and Dusty booking that AEW is. It's like literally like WCW's greatest hits. And that's such a beautiful thing because there were so many wonderful things about WCW that deserve to be cherished and respected and appreciated that we weren't able to do for the longest time because it became such a punchline. AEW's really brought it back to us.
I mean, that's the thing is like Cody just has a genuine love for, Jim Crockett, WCW. It's what he was raised on. It's his daddy's company.
Just imagine how every time that you guys out there come up with like a random fantasy booking idea, it always winds up being like some version of the Attitude Era, doesn't it? That's Cody, and it's always 80s NWA style WCW stuff because that's his perfect wrestling time.
Medusa climbs up the cage to drop Paulie's giant cell phone through the roof of the cage and into the ring. Sting gets up on the cage to run her off.
I marked out hard for her getting up on the roof, and I was like, what the fuck?
That was impressive. Climb the cage with no shoes.
Genuinely impressive. And like when Sting got up on the cage and was like jumping up and down on it, I was like, settle down. Yeah, please settle down. You're going right through that thing, buddy.
That roof did not look stable.
No. They hadn't come up with the technology for that shit yet.
The phone allows the heels to take control. Sting is the next man in. He bulldogs Austin. He hits a clothesline on Rude. He grates Austin's face against the cage. Eaton comes in. He's the last man in for the Dangerous Alliance, so it's 5-on-4. Zbyszko and Rude start trying to take like the ring ropes off the turnbuckle. Remember that for later.
Yes.
And then Nikita Koloff comes in, and the match beyond begins.
And the idea is that Sting Squadron is so beat to shit, and the heels, everybody but Sting is super fresh. So if Nikita turns on Sting, the heels are going to win. Like, it's the end of it. Like, Sting is basically by himself fending everyone off.
So this is the question. Will Nikita Koloff shake Sting's hand or slap his face?
And the fact that all of Sting's storylines in his whole career basically amount to, can this person I've erroneously decided to trust actually be trusted? It's so Sting.
Arn is bleeding like a stuck pig here.
It doesn't really seem like he needed to do that. I feel like Arn just felt like it.
Just wanted to.
It's fucking WarGames. I'm cutting myself.
Looks like Nikita's going to turn on Sting, but he helps him up and he shakes his hand and they kick some ass together.
a very cool moment.
Crowd goes ape shit. Nikita, just a softie at heart.
And
Magnum TA's injury changed him.
I was about to say, like, Nikita had always been kind of a babyface after the Magnum TA injury, which is one of those weird circumstances where, like, a real life situation turns somebody babyface. Kind of like Lawler's heart attack turned heel Cole babyface just because it had to. Just because how can you be a bad guy in the face of that?
They needed a babyface so desperately. Somebody had to face Flair at Starrcade that year.
Yeah, and God, that was when he's going to pass the torch. Another time that they almost had their successor lined up.
Such a what if in wrestling history.
I think I did like a Cewsh Reviews list one time of the five biggest like missed opportunities in wrestling history.
What were they? I'm interested.
Oh God, it was so long ago I don't remember all of them.
Did you have like Hulk Hogan and the AWA on there?
I did have that on there. I also had what if WrestleMania never actually happens and they don't get a slice of pay-per-view before it takes off with other people. I also had what if
Bischoff actually is able to buy WCW?
That's definitely was one of them, yeah.
That's a good one.
But the one that I focused on, I think, the most was this one. Because as far as the NWA was concerned, Magnum TA was going to be their Hulk Hogan. They had gone all in on Magnum TA. Everything about their future was set up to be for Magnum. They were going to go on. I don't know how much it necessarily would have worked. But in the eyes of the AWA, in the eyes of Ric Flair, that was the future.
He was really good. He was... You couldn't ask for more in a prospect than him.
And they had brought him along so slowly from the very, very, very bottom all the way to the top. And he could talk, and he had fire, and he could go. And Flair so badly wanted to put him over. Like that was Flair's hand-chosen successor. And then this car crash happens. Yeah. And it's one of those things, like, literally, they had to turn the phones off in the entire hospital because people besieged them with phone calls asking about Magnum.
Was so beloved. He was it's just North Carolina didn't have professional sports teams back then. This is before the Panthers, before the Hurricanes. They had Tar Heel basketball, and they had pro wrestling.
And he was going to be the thing that reached out to the national audience. Like, Ric Flair is great, but we got this dude who looks like the Marlboro Man with this rugged charm, and he's going to take us to the greatest heights there are. And 2 years after, the company's bankrupt. And I don't know how much of it is directly attributable to that, but it's such a gigantic question because everything booking-wise falls apart afterwards. They have nowhere to go. There's no other succession plan in place. It was all about Magnum.
Yeah, I am very eagerly anticipating getting into the old school Starrcades this November.
Yes, like we should probably tell you guys now, like we're going way back into the territory days, like a lot this year. In fact, the most we're ever going to compliment Michael Hayes on this podcast ever again is we're going to cover World Class, which is the Michael Hayes show. So there's just a lot of stuff we're going to dig back into, and that's going to be super cool. And we get to tell a lot of these stories that a lot of people may not know. A lot of people may not know the name Magnum TA. He hasn't been relevant to the wrestling industry since 1992.
So back in the present day of when this show is happening, the crowd is going wild for Sting and Nikita teaming up. Sting gets Arn in the Scorpion Deathlock, but Eaton breaks it up. We see that the top rope has come loose from the turnbuckle in one of the rings. Dustin gets Zbyszko in the figure 4. Zbyszko gets the turnbuckle. He tries to hit Sting with it, but Sting moves, and he accidentally hits Eaton in the shoulder with it. Sting then gets Eaton in the armbar, and Eaton gives up. Sting's Squadron gets the win. Hell of a match. This is my favorite WarGames.
Yes. As I said, my favorite is the one with the NWO versus the WCW. But I can't blame you for saying that about this one just because everything about this is It's as good as this concept can let it be.
This is heat. This is real. Like,
Yeah.
these fans are living and dying on this match.
It's a shame that they couldn't have had even more time to build into this, and that Vader wasn't on the Dangerous Alliance team, because if you replace Eaton with Vader, and Vader's the last one to come out...
Well, and let me explain what should have happened. Sting has got bad ribs here. Vader injured Sting's ribs. Sting, you do something where, like, all the baby faces get handcuffed to the cage except for Sting, and then, like, Vader gets Sting in, like, a camel clutch, and one of the baby faces should quit to protect Sting.
Yes.
To save... Sting doesn't give up, but Steamboat or somebody gives up for him to save him, because they know Sting will never quit, and Vader's going to break his back and end his career.
And that leads so perfectly into, like, their next match, where Sting's still hurt from this, and Vader just picks him apart.
Yeah, and he comes up short against the Beast, and Vader's the new champion, and who could ever possibly beat this man?
Vader with the stable behind him is untouchable.
Yeah.
Who can beat him? Ron Simmons!
I mean, the thing is, Ron Simmons a year down the line would be perfect.
Yeah, utterly credible, completely.
Not 3 weeks later.
And that's the thing, is that this place, this company, as we've kind of talked about, is overflowing with, like, young, vibrant, potential young baby faces. All of its heels are basically in the main event. They don't have any good undercard heels. So what better than to have this gigantic on top dominant heel stable that you can just throw young prospective baby faces at?
Yeah.
That's the dream. Like, just think about, Evolution didn't make a ton of stars necessarily, but, like, the television from, like, 2004, 2005 is so amazing, because it's literally everyone on the roster got a shot at Evolution. Jericho gets a shot. Fucking Maven gets a shot. Everyone gets a shot. And it's just such entertaining television to see, like, everyone getting a chance to play off of that huge heel
Anybody
force.
who went up against Evolution got over.
Yeah.
Like,
Eugene got gigantic Hulk Hogan over going up against Evolution for a little bit.
The heels argue after the match. Everybody's mad at Zbyszko. He's kind of been on the shit list anyway, because he had screwed up a couple times leading into this. So this is unfortunately already the beginning of the end for the Dangerous Alliance. It's way too soon, but they will be broken up by the fall.
Trash. And they have nothing to replace it with. They replace it with Vader by himself, but then they find up burying Vader, and then there's just nothing.
Vader and Sid is the big heel team of 1993, but then Sid gets fired because he has the fight with Arn Anderson in England with the scissors, and the only thing they have to turn to is Flair coming back and then putting the belt back on Flair.
And then if they don't get Hogan, I don't know what the future of this company could possibly look like.
I don't know if they would have survived without Hogan.
It's just, I don't know where any of this could have been going. No one had any real momentum. All of the potential big money-making savers, they had already blown all of those chances. It was a very depressing time. Even though the product itself wasn't unwatchable or anything, it was depressing. Kind of like now.
Yeah. JR and Ventura wrap up the show and we go to credits. A very interesting show there. I'd give that like a B, I guess. Bad first like hour and a half, but the last hour was awesome. Last three matches were dynamite.
I wouldn't say this was a good show, and I also wouldn't say it was a bad one. More importantly, the thing that really matters to me, especially someone who has to watch all of these shows, the thing that I look for in a show now is it interesting? Does every match has something in it that keeps me watching the match? And top to bottom, this show was fascinating. I loved it.
Yeah. You have a bunch of great talent on the undercard not being used correctly.
Oh, yeah.
And then what a loaded main event this was. But, I mean, the fact that they could even put on a show that was even remotely coherent with their top 10 guys being in the main event is remarkable. Like, that's roster depth.
Oh, God, yeah. And to have, like, tag matches when instead of having to use those guys in singles matches, to have Cactus Jack not even actually really be in a match.
Yeah,
Pretty impressive.
I mean, this company was not lacking talent. This was an
No.
incredible roster they had, and they just pissed it away with bad booking. Like, this is this is at least a moment of hope. It feels like things are going in the right direction here, and then Bill Watts is going to take over and run this thing right into a ditch.
Oh, it's so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's Stark WrestleWar 1992. Interesting snapshot from, kind of a brief moment of hope for WCW.
Yep.
Next time, we got something I'm really excited about. We're finally doing another ECW show.
How has it been so long? It was like our third ever show
I
the
know.
last time we did this.
How have we done more ECW shows than actual ECW shows?
That is a great question.
Because you love December to Dismember.
Bro, I love that show so much. I love it so much that I had to rebook it even. Check the Patreon for that, boys and girls.
But yeah, we are going back to cover. I haven't seen it, so I don't know if it's any good, but it's a hell of a card from 1995, which is the peak of ECW, in my opinion. Hostile City Showdown 1995. Loaded card here. We've got Cactus Jack versus Terry Funk, the Sandman versus Shane Douglas for the ECW title, Raven versus Tommy Dreamer, and Eddie Guerrero versus Dean Malenko for the TV title.
Man, to give you a little peek behind the curtain, we had the hardest time just figuring what show we should actually do. ECW is not a show that's easily broken down into individual shows.
That wasn't. I don't feel like that was really their model. Like they didn't get on pay-per-view until 1997, and I think the pay-per-views are mostly trash because the company. They've been rated by them. Like the good stuff was all pre-pay-per-view. But fortunately, WWE Network now has a lot of the pre-pay-per-view major shows on their network now. So we can go back and watch them.
So even if you don't necessarily care about this individual show, we're going to use it as a jumping off point to talk about like a whole bunch of shit.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see how this show turns out, but just about every match on this show appears to have something interesting in it.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, all that and more next time on the Lawcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next time.